Welcome to the Kuadrant weekly community call. Today is September the 3rd, and we have some items on the calendar. So let's get going. First item is on Guy about quadrant operator reconciliation. I cannot say that word. Reconciliation workflow. Sanity check. Okay, the sanity check is always good. There you go, Guy.
Thanks, Thomas. And that's precisely what this is about. So I want to run a quick sanity check on my take for the reconciliation workflow, something that myself, Jim, Kevin have been working on as part of the refactoring of the reconcilers based on the POS machinery implementation for it, right? If you can please, just follow the link and open that spreadsheet, Thomas. We don't need to get into details. It's, I think more importantly, I want to share the overall approach, right, and how we've been thinking on the problem, right? So this is basically just a list of tasks on more or less the level of granularity I see for the multiple different things that we need to do when reconciling events from the cluster, right? Obviously, there are different kinds of events, different kinds of tasks. Some of the tasks need to be executed across all kinds of events. Other ones could be filtered by specific kinds of events. So I'm trying to put some order in those, in thinking on those tasks in terms of dependencies. Something that I know that Eguski has tried already in the past. I don't know how far he went into the process, maybe other people as well, right? So my idea now is try to reconcile all those multiple attempts, to work this out into one single workflow that we can use, kind of the plan for the refactoring. Hopefully there will be no surprises there, right? It's basically the same thing we currently have in the form of independent reconcilers nowadays, with one or two minor differences only, right? For example, we do not have an event logging as a separate task, right? Rather, we do have kind of that across all the reconcilers. So this is a very simple one, just to start, at the beginning of a reconciliation event, to log the event, but it's also an opportunity maybe to start generating some and emitting some metrics for the control plane, right? Another one is a new one, but you may have bumped into it already if you check the Jim's pull request for the first step on adding the new reconciler. Is we're going to be generating and storing a config map with a representation, the latest representation of the topology given that event that is being reconciled. And that's going to be used not only across the workflow, but also by the OpenShift console plugin, as far as I understand, to be rendered for users, right? And so on, right? So we have a task for handling and managing the alter-in component, the limited door component, calculating the effective policies for a TLS policy, or basically creating the certificate requests. Similarly, for DNS, we create the DNS records and so on, right? On column D, and I will hand it over to you in a minute, Alex, we have the different few tests that I imagine could be applied, if you want to focus only on specific events to trigger that particular task, because not all tests need to be executed every time, right? So if we can rely on the event stream and we can trigger a future event, I guess those are the different kinds of resources that would most likely relate to that particular task. And finally, in the next column after that, there is a depends on info, which is basically my attempt to try to sequence and represent the dependency between the tasks, right? So we can decide on things that could be triggered, quote unquote, in parallel versus the one that need to wait for one task to finish, only then to trigger the next one, this kind of stuff, right? In contrast to the current approach where those tasks are usually all triggered in parallel. So I'll give you time, obviously, especially the people who are more directly involved with this, to check this spreadsheet and please make your comments. And the idea is to work on this a little further for the next few days, and then to start the actual work of turning that into code. It basically consists on moving business logic from the current reconcilers into the new reconciler with all the tasks structured in this way. Sorry, Alex. Now you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So I don't know about the topology thing, because that's where I wanted to say something, but I'm not going to say it, but it may still relate. So can you scroll back to that we see like the beginning? One, I'm very surprised if two, oh, it's updated topology, because that really depends on that. That's interesting. Anyways, my point is there is a bit of a chicken and egg problem.
Alex, sorry to interrupt. I have to interrupt you. You are right. This is wrong. The other tasks do not depend on updating the config map resource. The topology is calculated and it's in memory and it's being handed over already. This is completely independent. It gets the same version of the topology and just asynchronously store the config map. Sorry, I should not have said that those all depend on task number 2.
Okay. Yeah. That indeed surprises me less now. But still, the point I'm gonna raise is, and I know I discussed it in the past with some of you, if only you for sure, Guy. And that's so, and I'm just putting this there so for people to think more about it. But I wonder if there isn't a need eventually for a, sorry to use scary words, but like a two-phase commit kind of an approach to what we do. Meaning that we observe certain things, and the biggest culprit in this, quote unquote, is the wasm plugin and its dependencies, so that it needs to get there, right? So most importantly, it's config, right? So there is stuff that can, so there is a race condition in probably this thing there. I would need to see the dependencies now on the right-hand side, but don't scroll. It's fine because it doesn't matter. It's just a way of thinking about it, right? Where you inject, let's say, a NOS policy or whatever, actually, a policy that's handled by something. And by the way, I'm talking about auth. It's not introduced with the WASM work that's going on. That race condition was already there before, meaning that you need to have two things in sync for the thing to really do what you think it's going to do. And right now, we're not coordinating this as far as I know. And so there is this interesting problem where maybe the thing that we may want to do is just tell the WASM part, or let's say Envoy, actually, that handles the traffic, then an update to something that it knows that affects those things, say HTTP routes, for instance, right, is in the process of changing until the operands that actually care about those changes, so the auth config being accepted or the limits being properly updated, like whatever the other stuff, it's all going to be the WASM shim now, but again, it's not a property of that. Until those changes have been accepted, there is this period of flux, right? So where definitely what you want to see applied is not going to be applied. But beyond that, it's going to be a function of the past, whatever the past state was, and what the future state is to be. You'll observe different things for a more or less long period, which becomes very interesting in the face of failure, right? So the status stuff that you do, they'll at the end to say, hey, look at that. An auth config now really is being applied in such a way, and now you only then you can really know what it means. So I don't think that is necessarily reflected there, which is perfectly fine, because again, that's how we've been rolling for a while. But I think that's something to think about, if only with this work being done, so that this work becomes quote unquote friendly to that upcoming change, or let's say not too resistant to that upcoming change. And then at some point, we'll need to address this one way or another. So the two-phase commit change that I'm talking about is not necessarily the only way of doing that. There's many ways of, I think, solving that. But anyways, food for thought. And I just wanted to raise it as a thing with that work being ongoing.
Thanks for raising that, Alex. In fact, there are a couple of things to unpack on what you said. When you said two-phase approach for reconciliation, made me think on something else at the same time. That's why I raised my hand. But first, I'm going to comment on what you said. I don't mean to propose any kind of transaction control here in the classical sense of the term, like especially to enforce properties such as like atomicity, right? That's not what I mean. But it's a very interesting thing, to have in mind, because you're totally right. Some of the changes, some of the steps that change the state of the cluster cannot be considered complete if they depend on something else to happen only later on, right? And then comes the part of the two phase that I was thinking is, because I think this is very well reflected when you think on the task for updating status, right? Those are the typical kind of tasks that they depend on multiple things happening before, and you need to wait for those things to happen, or keep constantly checking on the multiple states of those other resources until you can work out one final state and say, this is the state to store here for this resource, right? So this is a very interesting problem, which kind of takes its own, how can I say, flavor, because we're working in the Kubernetes world, right? So we also need to keep in mind that every step there that generates another event will be already in itself cause something else to be enqueued, right? Another event to be enqueued that later on you need to process well. Sometimes we can leverage that, right? To kind of slice the workflow into steps and say, you know what, I'm going to only go this far in this iteration because this is going to generate a few events, and then I'm going to just wait for those events to be processed, because once I pick them up, then I can continue with the next step, right? While other times you want to avoid that. What you want to do is you want to, we're going to generate an event, but you want to make sure that whenever you process that event, it's going to be a null instead. So this is indeed a very interesting way to see the problem. It is a complex problem, right? I don't even know if what I'm trying to do here is too naive. Maybe it is, but this is mainly an invitation for the other people more skilled than I am on this kind of problem to help me with it.
So I don't think it's naive. I think it covers the happy path when everything works fine and is, let's say, very quick to happen. Let me put it that way. So I think that's the good starting point. I mean, that's my perspective. I could be wrong, could be missing something, but that's the way I look at this. So I think it's very useful. I think we should, this is what I'm saying. I think we should nail this properly, but know that reality, sadly enough, is indeed a little bit more horrible.
Agreed. And on top of that, I do have a couple questions that I left in the document. There are very specific questions that I don't have an answer for just yet. For example, one is there is no representation of the DNS operator there. Nevertheless, I understand the DNS operator is also a component. So I wonder, should we also be treating it in the same way we treat authoring and limited door, also checking the status of it, and have it considered when we update the status of the policies, DNS policy in this case, right? Or not. So that's one. So if that is, if you think that would be the case, then we probably need another task there, to get that covered. And another one is also in all of those tasks, you will find a corresponding issue or a set of issues created in GitHub, okay? One issue created in GitHub that is not represented here, nevertheless, it's related to the same problem, is one that I call dependency check, right? Something that Auguste introduced very well on the current code base, which basically consists of verifying the existence of APIs that we depend on in order to activate or deactivate specific reconciliation steps, right? That I do not know exactly how we want to hook that up with this new development. If we want to continue to be kind of a pre-step before even starting the reconciler, or if it's part of the reconciliation, I'm not sure. So I also need to know some insights on that.
And that question is laid out somewhere, or?
Yeah, it's in the agenda document.
Okay, I'll switch back.
Go, Alex.
So on the dependency check, I mean, that's a good one, right? Because, I mean, it feels a bit like it should should be all of the above, in the sense that, yeah, sure, you start up and you're like, yeah, things look fine, but you have no guarantees that when event foobar comes around, that whatever its dependencies are still around. So it's I think it's an interesting question in the sense, what would our stance be, right? Do we consider, oh, that's a screwed up environment, so it's life, and you just barf? One of the small prints in the doc that says if you screw around, because this feels like a never-ending story, right? If that makes any sense, like how far do you go? Like, yeah, I guess since you looked at that.
Yeah, this question is the root of this question is the another question, which is how do we want to support multiple gateway providers, gateway API providers. If we want to do, what if there are gateway, let's say Envoy Gateway and Istio at the same time in the cluster? What should Quadrant do? What I would do, so before we tackle that or we open an RFC for dealing with that, what I would do now, looking at GA, is to more or less behave the same we are doing in the current logic, which is this a task for reconciling Istio resources will be added to the workflow only if the CRDs are found or something. This is what the current implementation. I'm open for. I am aware this is a poor implementation of getting or knowing if the gateway provider is in place or not. But this is what we have. So this is what I will do. And last, before giving you the word, and the Quadrant status checks also about this, and if if there is no gateway provider found in the cluster, then it returns an error. If there are two of them or more than one, maybe we should also report an error, because the according to the current implementation, the consequences are, I mean, the what happens is unpredictable, because we will be creating more things than needed. So this is, I don't know, a proposal. We do the same we are doing right now. Alex.
Yeah, so absolutely agree. Let's keep things as they are. Again, I wanted to add another aspect to this that's been raised, if not in a public meeting, certainly like within Red Hat, is the case where a running cluster wants to migrate from one provider to another. I'm just back again to the point in time problem, right? So, oh yeah, you start up and it's foobar, your provider. Then you run, and somebody wants to slowly migrate everything to another one, right? So foobar is present at some point, then the other one appears, then slowly stuff migrates to that one, and then foobar disappears. So if we start looking into this problem, that's something to, again, account for. What would it mean, blah, 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 and how would we live with that? So back again to the point in time problem that I don't think is a fixed point in time or a frozen problem. That being said, on wherever that discussion happened, because I don't remember, the conclusion was, well, that's a problem for future us. So let's delegate
That's
to
an
future us.
interesting question that I will add to the RFC about the supporting multiple gateway API providers. What if we want to migrate from one to another? something that we should address in that proposal. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm adding comments directly to the document, but only to mention a couple of things there. The idea of registering a reconciler only if the corresponding dependencies it passes the corresponding dependencies. I think it's fine, but I wonder about bootstrapping, right? Whenever we are trying to install multiple things all at once and the currents involved. So we do not want at the first step, the quantum operator to not register something that in a matter of milliseconds will then will become available. So I'm thinking, instead of doing that, what if we do register the reconciler? I mean, if it's possible, right? Or we need to introduce some kind of wait before starting the workflow until some point. I don't know, right? But anyway, that's one of the problems that I see. So if we can register the reconciler, then definitely there must be some safeguard clause that we only actually do the work if it's possible to do the work, right? That's for sure. And when in the case where you cannot register a reconciler because it depends on the very API to exist, to be installed in the cluster, right? Then maybe we need to find a way of how we tell the quantum operator instance that it needs to wait for that to be true because it's expected, that API is expected to be installed at some point. Anyway, there are too many details to consider that. And as for Kuadrant only works for, if we do have the support, at least one of the supported gateway providers installed in the cluster, I also like to remind that I think that is not the case of the DNS and the TLS policies. So we also need to make a call here. If, let's say, we do not have neither Envoy nor Istio installed, can we still have Kuadrant only for DNS and TLS?
Is there a reason not to?
Well, I don't think there is, but yeah, Mike?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Can I just go back to the other doc first and then maybe answer that one? The one just in your list there, you've got event filters for DNS and TLS. You've got Kuadrant there. Is that Kuadrant resource you're talking about? Is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and you're right. I guess currently those kind of policies, I know that's where it's heading, right? Do not depend on the Kuadrant instance. Kuadrant instance is a wrapper for controlling or managing the installation of Arduino and limit door. But once we start thinking about what kind of gateway providers we will or we will not support, is this the kind of thing will be eventually represented in the Kuadrant CR? Then I wonder what does a Kuadrant custom resource even represent when it's created, right? So I guess this is the same question, right? From
yeah, I'm just wondering, like, because obviously at the moment you don't need that Kuadrant any events related to Kuadrant are meaningless for TLS and DNS in the current thing that we have. And I just wondered, are you intending to change that? And we're going to have it more like the rate limiting and off, where you need to have a Kuadrant instance before it will do anything. Is that what you're talking?
We've been thinking on the topology with the Kuadrant CR being the root of the topology tree, right? That's how we've been thinking. That ultimately would lead for the DNS and TLS concerns or features to also depend on the existence of a Kuadrant CR. But that would be completely artificial, something we would be adding here for no reason, because in reality, it does not depend on that. So I don't have an answer ready for you. It's not like I'm planning to change that. I'm open the question more than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. It's just when you were talking about that, I did wonder about whether you'd added that in there, or incorrectly, or you were expecting it would work the way you've just said. So that's answered that one. But if go back to the question that you had there, do we want Kuadrant operator that only works with DNS and TLS? I know that there is a reason that we do want an instance or Kuadrant operator to work for just DNS, and that's something Craig had been looking at related to OpenShift and being able to use the DNS operator via Kuadrant with policies for DNS only. So I think there is a reason that we would want a Kuadrant that only worked with DNS. But yeah, how we do that, I don't know. But like, that was one thing you said. The other thing, then, I suppose, the deployment status of the DNS operator. What do you mean by that? Then, like, why would the Quadrant operator be watching that? Does it watch the limited or operator status at the moment?
No, I'm thinking it does watch the not the limited operator, but the instance of limited or the instance of Authorino. Because if those instances are not ready, then we cannot say that the policy is being enforced. So I think ultimately that will affect the policy enforced condition. So I'm basically rolling out the same line of thought for the DNS feature as well.
Yeah, because when you create a Quadrant instance, it creates resources for limited or Authorino, doesn't it, related to that particular instance? And then you create other resources when DNS policies are created. Yeah. So it's a bit different, is what I'm meaning. Like, the DNS operator is more like the limited or operator. So why would you have the Quadrant operator watching the DNS operator when it doesn't monitor limited or operator?
What does update the status of the DNS record as custom resources? I'm guessing it's the operator.
Limited or operator, yeah.
DNS operator.
Sorry. DNS operator, yeah. So the thing that you updates the status for your things isn't the operator itself. It's the thing that gets deployed. Is that what you're saying? And
right.
You want to be able to...
What I'm saying is, let's say we could just rely on the status of the DNS records, right, instead, and not check the DNS operator. But what happens if the DNS operator is down, and then you change something in the DNS policy that ultimately should be reflected in the DNS records, but that never gets updated because the DNS record is down. You know what I mean? So anyway, maybe it's not a problem because we're going to update those resources as well. And by updating them, should we erase the status and wait for the status to be repopulated? Not sure. But I'm just saying that if there's something in the middle, do we need to watch that something, or we can just go back later on and check the status of the DNS records?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. So it's like if DNS operator, so you had a DNS policy and your DNS records were existing, the DNS operator went down for some reason, but you made a change to the DNS policy. How do you know that the changes you've made have been reflected? Because
they observe the generation.
Yeah.
In the status, you have a field which is reflecting. This is the status for the spec belonging to generation X. So if you change the spec, the generation is X plus 1, but the status is saying, hey, this is for X, not X plus 1. So this is what it tells you, that the status is outdated. Doesn't reflect the status of the current spec.
Yeah, this is a good point, Agus. Maybe this suffices. Maybe you do not need to care for the thing that is updated in the middle, but just making sure you keep track on the generation. And if it doesn't change, but it continues to be ready, it's meaningless because you expect it to change. Yeah, makes sense. But maybe Alex has something to say on this.
Not really. Though, yes, and yes. Don't complex things if you don't need the... Well, I guess that's what I was trying to say. Back to the whether there's a reason or not for a Quadrant thing to run in this, say, limited or partial, whatever deployment, I don't think should matter too much. I think we should look at it the other way around. Unless there is a good reason to complete all the things again, then we should avoid doing it, right? That should be the default stance. So as it turns out, yes, there is a reason for DNS, but okay, let's pick on TLS now, right? Yes, the answer is yes, it should work, because why not? Right? And if the why is in the, oh yeah, but it's easier to complete all the things today, I guess your answer should be, okay, well, that's not a good reason. And, you know, and maybe it's a temporal thing, right? Maybe today we say, again, back to what Agus said, right? Let's keep the whole dependency stuff as it is today for now, but because it's like this today doesn't mean it needs to be like this forever. And towards what do we want to converge, right? And I think this loosely coupled thing is still what I think we should try to converge towards. So again, not saying everything needs to be like that today. In the case of DNS, indeed, there is an actual reason today. But let's say there will be eventually a reason for all those things to be true for all of our things, whatever all of our things are by then, right? I think that's a good design sort of principle to stick to moving forward on the decision making that we make. Decision making we make. That doesn't sound like anything meaningful. Anyways, I'm done.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas. We really spent too much on this topic. I'll let it move to the next one, and I'll just try to capture some of the ideas here in the notes in the document. Thank you all.
Cool. Thanks, Guy. Yep. Moving on to adversity of the nightlies with where we're testing. Well, you explain it, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to find words that end in ease, and that's all the ones that I could find. And ease of fixing this might be one of the thing we want to look at. So I guess there is a long thread in Slack that I'll point people to if they want to understand more what's going on. But I guess the TLDR of it is that right now the nightlies test something that we don't really know what it is. I guess that's what it comes down to. Well, we do know what it is. That's sort of the good thing. So with the SHA in it, because that's the way that we test the nightly stuff, it goes, finds like the latest SHA and tries to compile like a consistent view of that, and then builds an image. Images with all of those things. Did he correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, right? So, or anybody for that matter, because there were a few of us looking into that problem. So that's not what we want. We need something a little better. And I think the problem splits in two. Like one, we need something that we can rely on ASAP. So I think whatever we can do that's easy enough to fix the situation today is, I think, what we should do. And then two, we need something that we can rely on for a longer period and isn't as brittle. So what we do today is, again, we base our stuff based on the SHA. So it's part of whatever gets built during the day throughout all our repos, gets pushed as container images to I gave up on our image repository, .io. And there is a job that looks at what was published at a given time t, finds the latest SHA for all those things, because things were tagged according to that, and then compiles the catalog stuff and all that to use that. Thomas.
Can we scope those two branches? Because it's basically not restricted to the main branch. No, is that?
Yeah, that's fundamentally, I think, the problem right now is there was this inferred guarantee that stuff that has a SHA lookalike thing based on a regex, right, labeled as what looks like a SHA means that it comes from main, but that happens to not be true, or at least not for all the things. And I don't want to search, like I took a few random samples on stuff that we publish, and so you end up sometimes the latest SHA tag thing is something that was branched off main like 2 weeks ago and happened to have an additional commit on that, right? So now you're testing, I don't know, some kind of a split brain problem, right? The thing that's 2 weeks old but has this additional change in it. So that's what I'm saying, like we test stuff, but how do we know that any of that makes sense together, right? What does it even mean? I don't want to even reason about those stuff, to be honest. So to answer Guy's question, the reason I think that we go to K whatever.io, right, is for the SHA, to look up the SHA, is to make sure that they got built and published there. He goes, no, that's not the reason. Well, Didi says, yes, that's the reason.
I'm just saying that we don't need that step in that way, right? we can reach the same conclusion without going to key.io to look up for the SHA. The SHA was generated in GitHub, not in key.io. It was later on pushed to key.io, right?
Yeah, but that needs to happen. That's my point. When you build the thing, right, you need to make sure that it's there.
I know. What I said is you can go to GitHub, get the SHA, and then you update, hey, this is the SHA that needs to be tested, right? Because that's the reason why we are storing that SHA in those org variables, right? Because so QE can use that and pull those images. That's my understanding, right?
No, I don't think that's the way this works. Like then the nightly stuff gets built, gets that stuff injected, and all that is automated as well. So you have a nightly.
What does the nightly pull then? Latest, always latest.
The SHA that gets injected in there. That's the point.
Wait. The QE suite needs to pull specific images, right? So the tags in those deployments that they create are, what does it say? Does it say latest or does it say a concrete SHA? If it's a SHA, where do they get the SHA from?
We are using catalog for Kuadrant 90.
Oh, and the catalog includes the SHA.
Yes.
That's why we need the SHA and inject that. Sorry, that's
latest. It's the same.
No, it's not the same. So point being, it's a tree of dependencies, right? Even if they only look up one, say SHA or latest, I don't care. Then what that contains and point to the older stuff is hard-coded inside the catalog.
How did it get inside of the catalog?
Through that system that goes.
Exactly. So it's the same. One step back then. When we build the catalog, we build it from the information in GitHub, right? Those variables.
Yeah, now you need to be really precise about what you mean. Yes, the org variables is what we use, yes.
Okay, so how does it start then? We merge something to main, right? At the end of the day, there's a workflow that will get a set of SHAs and update GitHub or
that's the key.
Variables.
That's the key. The thing that goes check the set of SHAs goes to key.io, looks at what is the latest stuff for all the things that we care about that got published there.
What I'm saying is, why does it have to go to key.io? Well, all he wants is to know what is the SHA, right? And the SHA should be the latest SHA in the main branch of those repos.
Okay, let me interrupt.
That's not true.
The thing is, if we're going to key.io, because we need to make sure the image it's there. It's already published, because we need it for Quadrant operator cannot, and the bundle command, it will fail if it doesn't actually fetch the actual image. That's pretty much why.
I disagree. We go to key.io because we need to know the SHA. That's why we go to key.io.
No, because
the latest SHA, yes and yes. I mean,
wait. But the latest SHA that built and got published successfully to key.io, right? That's what matters. So you cannot guarantee that the head of main has the same SHA that fixes what the conditions I just described.
First, we need to know what the SHA is. Then we need to know if the image was published, right? Those are two separate things. I'm saying that we need to fix the first problem, how we get the SHA. The second problem is solved for free. That's what I'm saying, because you need to deploy that. When you deploy that, if the image does not exist, pulling the image will fail. And when it fails, in itself already tells you that it was not pushed to key.io.
So now is the question, what does it mean when it fails, right? So let's say if a goose that works all the fucking time, because there's no other way he gets all this work done, merges a PR at T-2 seconds before that job runs.
Mm-hmm.
Now your SHA is there, that's the head of main, but the test didn't run on that, it didn't get published, and so forth. So now your catalog building is gonna fail, but for no good reasons, because everything is fine. We just said it goes wrote the code, so we know it's gonna pass the test and it's gonna eventually appear there, right?
No.
So, and that's the race condition that you have. Sorry,
That's
what?
what I'm saying. Building the catalog will not fail. It only fails because it waits until it's in key.io and it's fetching the wrong thing from key.io. I'm saying it does not need to get it from key.io.
What is the it there?
SHA. The SHA.
Okay, no, but that I agree with you. Well, I don't agree. Well, I possibly agree with you. The point I'm highlighting is if you get the SHA from the head of name,
Yes.
right? There is a time window in which making the bundle is not going to succeed because when it's going to use that SHA to look up the catalog, that's going to fail. That's what I'm trying to highlight.
Because OLM CLI2 check in key.io, unlike previous CLI2 that I used that did not check in key.io.
Whatever. That's the problem we have. And this is just a race condition, but it's a bit like what I just explained in the previous point that we were discussing.
Question.
All that can also fail. If I wrote the code, chances are really high that I wrote a shitty test that's going to be racy, that's going to fail on main. As such, it's never going to make it to key.io. And as such, now I broke nightly for everyone. And everybody hates me yet more than they already do. And I cannot afford that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a separate problem.
I'm not a goose.
The first one on building the catalog, I ran into that problem recently when I was checking
Can I sorry interrupt this though? Because even though all this matters, I think we're talking like one point that Diddy made in the chat really matters. And I think he broke the problem in two. One, we have a broken stuff going on right now that needs fixing. And I think we all agree ASAP because our nightlies right now are just noise, right? So it's twice now, or three times actually already that we get some reports about broken stuff that just happened because they're testing like the middle of a branch somewhere that obviously doesn't work with something. So that we want to see fixed ASAP. Then the second point is we need to have a thing that passes the test of time and hopefully a solution that we can rely on. And I think everything you're discussing right now, Guy, relates to point number two. So I think it matters, don't get me wrong, but I think my first question would be, what do we do right now? Because right now stuff is broken and we cannot trust it.
I think the quickest way is, like Didi said, we are not using the SHAs built from branches, so we stop doing that. It's a PR this afternoon or morning, and tomorrow we have nightly builds that should be famous last words correct. And then we go to the second point, because I am also I agree that this system is not very robust. It will be broken sooner than later, and we decide a new way of doing this, more consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't agree with anything that you said. What I'm thinking that maybe in parallel or at the same time, the reason why we have this system in place in the first place is because, as far as I understand, we want better traceability whenever something fails nightly, right? But before that, we used to deploy latest. So my question is, do we have still have catalogs built that point to the latest image tag instead of the SHA? Because if I remember correctly, we had two versions of the catalog. One that said latest, another one with the SHA. The catalog image itself that is tagged as a SHA pointed to also a SHA. The one that is tagged as latest, I think it points to latest. Can somebody please confirm that?
Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we are publishing catalogs pointing to latest images. Mainly because that's not useful. No, not useful. It's you cannot reproduce that because latest is the latest. So today is something, tomorrow is something else.
Yeah,
you cannot reproduce. So
you're talking about the system.
Yeah. For local development, there is a makefile target which builds a catalog. And if I'm not wrong again, that target is building a catalog with pointing to latest, which is because we assume you are testing something now, and this is for development, for dev testing, not for queuing. This is for us, for having something to test some upgrade path or something like that in OLM.
Yeah, what I'm heading is, I think the quickest solution to the problem, so we can get back to relying, to trusting on the nightly test, is point the nightly test to latest. That is the quickest solution. Then we can fix, the actual image tags and make it go back, to fetching specific images instead. In other words, the situation we had before all this work of tagging images with the SHA.
But pointing to latest, Jakub tells me this nightly is failing. I installed the catalog and it's giving me another SHA, another Wasm shim. It's giving me another limitador operator.
That's why I asked what's inside of that catalog tagged as latest. There is an image pushed to Kit.io, for the catalog image that is tagged as latest. We need to see what's inside of that one. If that is pointing to an image that is also latest, then it should work. But if it's only to a fixed SHA, then it won't work. What I'm saying.
But in the catalog, there are URLs. They shouldn't be latest for QE, because then I cannot reproduce what they are seeing. Because when they deploy and they test, they will get the latest. They tell me, hey, this is wrong. I deploy, and it will be a new something else. Because
no, I understand. What I was saying is I was willing to give up on the traceability aspect if that was to fix the problem more quickly. And
I'm not concerned about traceability, because traceability, we can check the logs and see the JIT SHA being run. I'm more concerned on having the reproducibility. I mean, to have the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's the same. Yes.
Guys, I'm gonna stop this. We have 10 minutes left. I'm not gonna make it. I think in the chat there are some good things that Didier is saying. Let's take this like that. Let's take the quick solution and the long-term solution outside of this meeting. I want to go to the round table and have a quick look at the board, maybe, if we have enough time. If that's okay with you, unless there's something, or add it to the notes for today's meeting. Otherwise, we're just going to run out of time. Okay. Let's do a quick. Let me go to the. No demos. Let's do a quick roundtable on most important thing worked on over the last week, did, and then raise your hand if you have something to say. Nobody has something to say. It's an interesting part of the call. It's slowly failing, but it's okay.
Well,
okay.
I mean, I'm still trying to get Alperino using V1 Beta 2. And I don't know if everybody's in the same boat, but there keeps on being stuff like this happening. So I'm saying that. I'm very distracted.
Right. From the actual work by things like this.
Yeah. And I think this stuff that we just discussed matters quite a bit, right? So,
yeah.
And so yeah, this testing stuff, when QE comes and something's broken, obviously you start looking into it. And then you're like, well, why are we even testing that? So I think just yes, let's fix this ASAP, because this is going to eventually waste everybody's time otherwise, in turns. So certainly QE for sure. And then whomever they reach out to every single time. Nobody wins.
Yeah. Should we maybe have an owner of this problem? Because otherwise we'll leave this meeting and nobody is going to fix it. Or at least nobody feels responsible for driving that.
So I think Didi and I are meeting after this.
Right.
If to at the very least decide on something. If I need to drop and do it, I'll do it. because this needs fixing. So if you care about this, join the meeting after this one. And if you don't, hold, like, be silent forever. Blah, blah, blah.
Share the link, please. I will.
I'll drop a open how do you say that? Open meeting. I don't even know how to do that in Slack in the following of this long discussion.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Nobody raised their hand for the round table, so let's just move on. Have a quick look at the board. Are there any issues we should be talking about that are currently in progress or about to go in progress? Just scrolling down slowly. But like Alex was saying, these kind of things being broken distract from the actual work that's reflected here. Nobody wants to say anything? No? Okay.
I maybe have one question. Like, I think, actually, maybe no, I don't. Because there is a bit of a dependency with regards to releasing. And it's probably mostly me then, I guess, Authorino, right? Because of the API version updates. And I was thinking, do we care about that stuff for the WASM machine? But I think the answer is no. So I think it's fine. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think I literally have 1 week left to get my work merged. Because otherwise it'll be a problem. Or we need to cut off another release of Authorino at some point, not in line with the iterations, but that version needs to exist. Though I'm lying, am I not? Because the work that had to be in there is actually done. The revamping of the controller doesn't matter, right? It's
While we are serving V1 beta 1, it does not matter.
right.
It will matter once we introduce V1 beta 3 that is backwards compatible.
Otherwise, I can't do the cell injection anyway.
Yes.
So I really need it. But my point being, whether it happens now or all happens next iteration, it's actually not a red flag. So sorry, I lied. There's no red flag.
Yeah, I get the reason. Yeah.
And I think
I'm not entirely sure though. I don't know if you remember, but whether we will be able to change the stored version in the same release as we introduce the new version. I don't know if you remember that. There's some. I don't know if that works. If it does, then no problem.
Yes, it would, because people could use this version released at the end of this, of the Authorino version released at the end of this iteration, with the change in, but they would need, and then run this, patch nothing thing. That would update it, then update to the version that hopefully will release at the end of the next iteration. That has the V1 beta 3 in it. And then I think it's fine. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think, I thought I was screwing up if I don't get my work done at the end of this week, but actually I think I'm wrong. I'm not arguing that I shouldn't get it done, arguing that it's not a big deal. And I think I'm correct in my thinking.
I bet you're right.
Wow. I'm only saying that because you're off afterwards. Was somebody else's problem. Smart.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I think then we're done for this call. Thanks, everybody, for your inputs, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Cheers.